Why you held on to those documents when you knew the federal government was seeking them and then had given you a subpoena to return them?
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk?
Yeah, what's the
answer? Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple to, you're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
Can you answer why you held on to the documents?
I was negotiating and we were talking to...
Kaitlan Collins just served Donald Trump a massive slice of humble pie live on TV, and his reaction was unforgettable. Picture him red-faced and at a loss for words, as Collins casually dropped a truth bomb he never expected. Trust me, you've never seen Trump this rattled.
I don't think that's a dispute.
So he doesn't think he can fire the Fed chair?
I think that's been resolved in the previous administration. You can go back and find a clip where I talked about it right in the space.
Kaitlan Collins isn't holding back when it comes to Donald Trump, and he's making headlines for all the wrong reasons. This time, he's gone and fired 2 Democratic Federal Trade Commission, FTC, commissioners, treating it like a reality TV stunt. It's the kind where someone is abruptly kicked off with no warning, no explanation, just because the star feels entitled. But let's be clear, Trump, this isn't a TV show, and that's not how things work in the real world. You can't fire people just because their political views don't align with yours or simply because you...
One of President Trump's top economic advisors, Kevin Hassett, as soon as he wrapped an interview. This was coming about 24 hours after President Trump had summarily fired both of the Democratic commissioners who serve on the Federal Trade Commission, which they argued was an illegal move by the president. And it also raised questions, certainly in the business world, about whether or not that could mean that Trump is preparing to seek to fire other independent agency heads, like potentially the Fed chair, Fed board members. A question that I posed to Mr. Kevin Hassett. The president fired last night 2 members of the FTC, the Democratic members of that. It raised questions about whether or not he does respect the independence of the Fed, or he thinks that they are fair game as well. What is the president's view on that?
We very much.
If you're enjoying, please subscribe. And by the way, we have Trump merch available for a limited amount of time. The link can be found in the description.
If you're enjoying this, don't forget to subscribe. By the way, we've got exclusive Trump merch available for a limited time. Check the link in the description. Whether it's his blatant disregard for legal norms or his usual attempts to dodge accountability, it's clear Trump has always believed the rules don't apply to him. But this time, the law has his number, and it might finally be time for him to face the consequences of his actions.
To get this to the Supreme Court, try to overturn the 1935 precedent. The goal was to let these individuals go. If we have to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, we certainly will.
Collins isn't having any of Trump's power plays. You can't just fire people for doing their jobs, especially when it comes to government commissioners whose role is to hold businesses accountable. These commissioners were ensuring companies didn't run wild, something Trump clearly can't stand. Yet, like a petulant child, he fires them for doing their jobs too well. But when you're someone who believes the law doesn't apply to you, I guess this is just another Tuesday.
One of the fired commissioners, Commissioner Bedoya, told the New York Times, and I'm quoting now, "When people hear this news, they need to not think about me. They need to think about the billionaires behind the president at his inauguration." My next source was appointed to the FTC by President Trump actually during his first term in 2018. She was the other Democratic commissioner fired by him yesterday, Rebecca Slaughter.
Kaitlan Collins isn't letting Trump get away with it this time. This isn't just a whoops, I made a mistake moment. This is classic Trump behavior. He's firing anyone who stands in his way, especially when it comes to those doing their job of enforcing accountability. These FTC commissioners were making sure businesses were held to fair standards, something Trump absolutely hates. He doesn't want to be checked. He wants free rein to do whatever he pleases. But guess what, Don? The law doesn't bend to your whims. It's illegal to fire people just because you don't like them, no matter how much you think you're above it all. Kaitlan isn't pulling any punches. This isn't the first time Trump's pulled something like this. It's become a pattern. He doesn't like what someone's doing. Fire them. Whether it's staff, employees, or now government officials. Trump's idea of leadership is to toss anyone who disagrees with him out the door. And when confronted about his reckless actions, he deflects. But don't worry, Kaitlan has got his number.
The statute that governs the FTC says that someone who is in your position cannot be fired only if they can be removed for cause if there is neglect, malfeasance, or inefficiency. Were you given any of those reasons when you were fired?
No, absolutely none.
And so what was there just any argument whatsoever beyond the letter you received?
The president can fire you, and so he chooses to do so.
Trump may think he's playing a high-stakes game of chess, but it's clear he's just throwing a tantrum. Accountability. Who needs that when you can fire people who hold you to any standard? For Kaitlan Collins, this isn't a small misstep. It's another example of Trump's total disregard for the law, fair competition, and anyone who dares challenge his vision. He fires people like it's a joke. But Kaitlan's not laughing. She's calling out the hypocrisy, recklessness, and blatant power grab that's been Trump's trademark from the start. The worst part of this stunt, Trump's reaction. He's not taking responsibility for his actions. Instead, he's blaming everyone else. The commissioners were incompetent. The system's unfair to him. In Trump's world, it's always someone else's fault. Well, Kaitlan Collins isn't letting him deflect this time.
You believe that's illegal?
It is absolutely illegal. The statute that you referenced is very clear on its face. And in fact, the Supreme Court has evaluated whether it is a constitutionally valid statute and whether a president can remove an FTC commissioner. Exactly this question. They faced it 90 years ago when FDR tried to remove an FTC commissioner, Commissioner Humphrey. And they said, no, the law is clear. They cannot be removed other than for cause. And that is a constitutional law.
These commissioners were simply doing their jobs. And for that, Trump thought it was acceptable to fire them. But as Kaitlan points out, Trump doesn't want to be held accountable for anything. He just wants to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, with no consequences. This is where Kaitlan draws the line. He can't keep getting away with this. Trump's entire life has been a string of scandals, yet he still walks around like the rules don't apply to him. Kaitlan's here to remind everyone that this isn't a minor issue. It's a blatant abuse of power, and it must be called out for what it is.
You had something interesting in your statement when you were fired, and you said that you believed, in part, it was because, quote, I have a voice and he is afraid of what I'll tell the American people. What is it that you have to tell the American people?
Yeah, well, it's a really important point. I am a minority commissioner right now. That means I am not in charge of the agency. But what the FTC minority commissioners can do, and what commissioners at other independent agencies can do, is bring transparency and accountability to the work of the agency. So without the voice of the minority commissioners, if you see, for example, the FTC dismiss one of our many litigations against some of the big tech CEOs who flanked the president in his inauguration, you may not have any reason to know what was going on behind the scenes or what some other explanations or counter arguments will be. And that transparency and accountability has served the FTC really well for over 100 years.
Trump has no business firing people who are simply doing their jobs, and he certainly doesn't get to treat this like some game where he can bend the rules to his will. At the end of the day, Trump isn't just undermining the system, he's breaking it. It's high time someone like Kaitlan holds him accountable, because if we don't, this will only continue. Trump will keep thinking the laws don't apply to him and that he can fire anyone who challenges him. But we know better, and Kaitlan's not backing down from calling him out.
Real thing. I mean, we have that picture of all of the CEOs who were flanking Trump at his inauguration, but the FTC is in active litigation with some of, maybe all of, a lot of these people.
Almost all of them. Almost all.
You're looking at the names. And
I'm looking at the names right now. Almost all of them.
And so you're saying that in your position, you'd be able to speak out and say, okay, hey, they just dismissed this case against this company. Here's why I think that's a problem, or I disagree.
Yeah, so for example, in 2019, when I was in minority commissioner at the FTC settled a big privacy case with the company that was then called Facebook for a $5 billion payment. The majority of the time touted it as the largest payment ever and a huge successful win for law enforcement. But I said I disagreed, that I thought it wasn't nearly what the violations merited, and people should understand it as a slap on the wrist for a company that had the kinds of profits and revenue that Facebook had at the